Lady goats and gentle goats, welcome back to the Blue and Gold podcast. We've had a little hiatus, I swear. Life is like ebb and flows, and when it flows, I don't know if that's the right terminology, it just gets like super, super busy. But I'm here with my esteemed co-host, Geoffrey Whiteside, and a rare pleasure, because she's also been described as one of the busiest people in the world, but not busy like in a bad way, busy as in like accomplishing a lot of different things in a lot of different arenas. Gaby Gonzalez from the great class of, say it?
17.
See, I can't say it. Marine ground, and then got out and now pursuing a myriad of entrepreneurial things, which I'm so excited to dive into. She is married to her wife, Lauren. They live down in North Carolina, but they sort of split time up there. I don't know. I feel like you guys are all over the Eastern Seaboard, so we'll dive more into that too. But Gaby, thank you so much for making some time for Geoffrey and I.
Thank you guys for having me. I know we've been trying to do this for a few months.
You're a busy woman.
Yeah.
So introduce yourself to the goats.
Yeah, so I'm Gaby Gonzalez. Like JD said, I won't repeat that. I have a cigar brand. It's called Entrepreneurial. I'm in real estate investing. That's how, honestly, JD and I really started hanging out after the Naval Academy, and you too, Geoffrey. So I still do that. It's still a big part of my life, but we have this really cool brand, and we're trying to do something greater than it beyond just a cigar brand. It's a lifestyle kind of brand we're trying to build. We invest in women's sports, so at least 50% of everything we make is going to go into different leagues. So we're investing in Unrivaled Basketball, which is that WNBA player-created league that's launching in Miami January 17th of 2025. And then we also are sponsoring and supporting Steph Simon. She's a Marine Navy grad, was my classmate.
I didn't know you guys were sponsoring Steph. That's sick.
Yeah, so she just debuted as a professional boxer, won her first bout, and we're working with her. Steph's actually Cuban as well, so it's a cool collaboration because that's part of her culture, the Marine Corps and the Cuban culture. And then another big part of our brand, so speaking to that, Marine Corps traditions and the art of hand-rolled cigars, keeping that alive, just keeping that part of my culture alive, and then doing it in a new way, a new vibe. And then we're about celebrating, not habit making. So I think tobacco always gets lumped in as like a bad thing. Cigarettes are not cigars, right? Two distinct things. The same with vapes. Cigars, I think traditionally, honestly, we're always for celebrating. You thought of it like powerful people celebrating a win. And that's what we're about. We're all about celebrating. We make that clear. We're not like a habitual smoking company, which makes my life harder.
Yeah, because if I was a CEO, I would be, got to test the products every morning at lunch and at night.
Yeah, I'll be so unhealthy.
One of the things I remember where I capped a big event was at the basic school. There's a tradition where during mess night, everybody has a cigar, right? Do they still do that, right, Gaby?
Yeah, at least they did in 2017, in 2017 when I did it.
Yeah,
I think we're getting to be old goats now.
Yeah, to tie it into real estate. So, like, at TBS, the basic school, when you get close to graduation, you have a mess night, and all 290 people smoke a cigar in a room. And it's the most impressive HVAC function I've ever seen because it also is the cafeteria. And by the next morning at 6 a.m., there's no cigar smell, which is crazy. That aside, Gaby, I've seen some of your videos. Geoffrey has received his first batch of cigars. It's in the cart because I was dropping my kids off and I couldn't find my credit card. The process was super easy. So whoever did your UX, kudos. But for those of us who do smoke cigars for celebrations and want to learn more about it, can you walk me through the life cycle of like a cigar? Where is it planted? How is it? Is it a seed? Is it a tree? Like, I don't know anything about this.
It is a seed. So background on our family. My uncle's parents and grandparents had factories and fields in Pinar del Rio, Cuba. Then the Castros came and stole everything. You know how that goes. And then he took seeds from his parents' factory and went to Nicaragua, bought some property there, planted them there, took some former employees of his parents, flew them to Nicaragua to teach the new Nicaraguan employees how to do the same hand rolling tradition, that art, taught them how to do that. And then he did this over 16 years ago now when he reestablished the business out there. And so we plant and grow the tobacco there. It's fermented correctly. So like a big thing, if you have a bad cigar that's not fermented correctly, that's when you go to sleep and the next morning you can still taste that.
What is that? I didn't even know they were fermented at all. I'm learning something.
Yeah. So, and the fermentation process is what creates the distinction between a bad cigar, somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, and then somebody who knows what they're doing. So, our cigar, you're not going to smoke it when you're celebrating and then wake up the next morning and you still have that nasty taste in your mouth, that tarry residue. But yeah, so, and then it's hand rolled, right? It's not a machine that's capping these things, right? And rolling them. Like, it's maintaining that art of what our family did for 4 generations now.
And so, employing people. How cool is that? You're employing real humans.
Yeah. In Nicaragua, and now with Antipoliticas, we're based out of actually Camp Lejeune, nice. Out here in North Carolina. So we've had some really cool meetings lately. We're looking at a trajectory of being in all the stores on base for the beginning of the year, and off base as well in a few spots, but definitely on base with another Marine Corps veteran who has all those shops and contracts, which is awesome. And we also love the idea of just making Camp Lejeune the home of Antipoliticas, because that was our first home as Marine Corps officers. And the Marine Corps tradition is a big part of why I did it. Like, having a cigar to celebrate at mess night or at the balls and stuff was something that we regularly did.
That's awesome. Gab, you kind of sped past your like real estate background. I want to give people like a full scope. Like she's been like a top realtor. She's done real estate investing. She's flipped properties. She's done real estate development. And I believe she started some of her businesses while she was still in. So what advice do you have for somebody looking to, start that side hustle while they're still active duty? Maybe they're on sea duty, got a little bit more time. So yeah, what advice do you have for them? Because I just know that you're a really high level person.
Goats are always doing that, man. They're always doing that. They're crossing over. It's like, why am I got to pull this amazing achievements out of you? Please, I know you're humble, but come on, let's hear a little bit of the deets.
Well, speaking of goats always doing that, like if you were an officer, for the most part, we're always doing something in our active duty career, but you have a set salary, right? As soon as I saw that my effort was rewarded in kind when I started doing real estate, I just ran with it. I was working like 18-hour days, not recommending that to most people, right? But I was like, whoa, I'm getting paid to do this. Like, I am hustling, but I'm getting paid equally according to my effort. So getting into real estate sales was awesome. I think it is, especially with the networks we have, if you're working hard, you're going to be compensated. If you're driving and hustling, I think that's one of those things that you can just hustle and you're going to succeed. Unless you have a terrible attitude. I mean, can't help that. But
what about the real estate investing portion?
Yeah. So naturally, like, I'm fortunate that Lauren, who's also, she's a 15 grad and is still active duty. We just said, we're just going to live on your active duty income. And then all the income that I made on my part now with real estate, I just rolled into purchasing properties. So while I was in this world, I was finding opportunities, and instead of finding somebody to buy them, I found myself. So I would buy them. And I use that as a territory to get my feet wet, do renovations from just like cosmetic renovations to full guts all the way down to the crawl space. And then I tried short-term Rentals, I have one still. Not the biggest fan. We could talk about that if you wanted to, but volatility is huge. And then long-term rentals, it's just more consistent, and I'm a fan of that. Finding the right property managers was interesting. And now I'm studying at Georgetown, my commercial real estate degree, and I bought my first commercial real estate investment out here in Camp Lejeune. And now I'm shifting to just investing in commercial real estate, which I don't think it's something you can really do alone. So still working that part out because I need to find the right team to take on bigger projects, but that's kind of the goal on that front right now.
That is awesome. That is awesome. You mentioned, short-term rentals not going so well. What are some of the mistakes you have made while either starting a company or running companies? Obviously, you have a lot of experience. So what are some of the mistakes that you can, express to goats to save them some time and effort and headache?
Also, the amount of cigar puns that are flying around, like whatever you say, roll, like hands on. I'm just like salivating over
roll
here.
Goats, roll cigars,
Yeah, right.
So I think a biggest thing is contingency. Like, I have yet to figure out the right contingency budget. I don't know what. I'm just picking all these superstar properties, and somehow my contingency always gets blown through.
What does that mean? Can you break down what that is for second-class midshipmen listening?
If you are purchasing a property with the intention of renovating it, and you have a scope of work that you're anticipating, you walk through the property, you check it out, you say, I think I need to do all these things.
It's always going to be more.
It's always going to be more. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what buffer you put in there, because contingency is that. It is that buffer. I have yet to do a project where my contingency buffer wasn't blown through.
Oh, yeah.
I've increased it. It just keeps happening.
I'm like, yeah, my buffer's in. I've increased it by like 500% since I first made my buffer. It's not even a real.
You're still blowing through that, JD. Dang. I mean, I haven't done that much, but I think it's hard, and it's also, I think a lot of us academy vets and grads, we have a certain standard. So like, I always find myself overdoing it. I'm like, I can't leave this. If I find another problem, I can't just skip over it. I can't look over it and put lipstick on a pig. I have to fix it. So that's why it really gets blown.
So well said.
Yeah. That's why it really gets blown, because you run into things and then I'm like, no, I need to fix it 100%. And then I wasn't planning on that expense. So that's one of the big things. And when it comes to short-term rentals, the biggest thing that you can never really plan for is utility cost, in my opinion. Because the tenants that are staying there, they don't care. I mean, it's just like a hotel, right? Nobody really cares. And man, I have one property and I just keep getting water bills that are like $600. And I'm like, how? How is the water bill $600 in this single family home? And it's not a pipe leak, because I've checked in on that a few times. But it's people just leave things running. And so that's just really hard to accommodate. And a lot of short-term rentals are seasonal. So it might feel really good during the summer months, or during, if it's a snowbird season, that snowbird season. But as soon as you hit that off season, you feel it. And if you make the mistake up front of spending that money instead of keeping it in reserve, it's going to hurt during off season when you're trying to make those mortgage payments and those utility bill payments.
Gabby, did you and Lauren live near your Airbnbs or your short-term rentals while you were renovating them? Like, were you hands-on, or were you pretty far away, or how was that?
The first one, we were hands-on 100% for the reno. And then we moved away shortly thereafter to Maryland. So it was in South Carolina. We moved to Maryland. The second one we bought was also in South Carolina on Harbor Island. JD lives out there, so that's why I'm pointing at the camera.
That's great. That's a great spot.
We did the full renovation remotely. I have yet to be in the house. We actually planned a vacation during a 4-day window in December to finally stay there post-renovation and see it in person. I actually have to say, that's a love-hate relationship. I know the South Carolina market well, and so I felt comfortable purchasing this property, and I had general contractor contacts and management in place.
Gotcha.
So I was confident doing it, and it was better than when I was there, because when I truly hired a general contract and it was budgeted that way, I saved so much of my own time, right?
Yeah.
So that was a big win. On the flip side, I am weary of doing it in any market I don't know. And we have properties in Maryland as well, where I have yet to identify a good management company for long-term rentals.
It's tough. It's tough.
And so I self-manage them, which is a huge pain that I personally don't want to do. But yeah, there's so many things we could talk about. Management's so critical. If you have a good team, that's awesome. And then maybe you can tackle something that's far away.
Yeah.
But definitely having those relationships in that team before tackling something far away is probably something that I would advise.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You did touch on something. You said, I like long-term rentals, right? And that's what I always preach. I believe you should always run your numbers in accordance with like long-term numbers, or maybe even like house hack, right? So I think that's important. And two, kind of have like a backup plan or an exit plan if you're going to go with a more like risky strategy. So on your entrepreneurial journey, would you do it all over again? You started multiple businesses. You know what it's like. It's not what, Instagram makes it seem or anything like that. It's really a struggle. So would you, take this journey again?
I would 100%. I think what I would definitely say is that I have no regrets in terms of doing everything or trying to do everything, because I know that I'm never going to be like, man, should I have tried that? Like, were some of them the best ideas? Absolutely not. But I can take the lessons learned away from it. So for somebody who's like active duty or on their way out, I would say 100% just dive into it. You can always scale it back. I'm in the process of scaling it back. I have too much going on, but I'd rather be in this position where I'm like, yeah, this is doing great. This isn't so hot. I'm not really interested in this anymore. I'd rather have all those options instead of being like, man, I was afraid of starting this or trying this. And now I might have missed the boat on that. What would it have been like if I would have tried?
Yeah, absolutely. You would have been like living with like regret, essentially, which makes sense.
Yeah.
What skills as a Marine really converted to your entrepreneurial journey?
I think it's the hustle. Like, seriously, man, I think the hustle, like working hard, that mentality, the drive, the standards that we set for one another. Like I do. It's hard for me to see some of the other investors in my area and the products they put out.
Yeah.
I would personally feel uncomfortable slapping my name on that product.
Especially like rehab properties. Oh, man.
Yeah. And there's pride in like what I put my name on. And I think a lot of us share that. I actually think that's like, yes, isn't more expensive and costly and everything. Yeah. But I think that in terms of maintaining that reputation, that makes a huge difference for us when we get into that world. And what was the question? what was the rest of the question?
In the Marine Corps, what skills did you learn that honestly like converted over to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I think the Marine Corps, the one thing I'd say is like, watch out, because the attitude we have in the Marine Corps and just like the directness, it really throws people off edge that are not in the Marine Corps. That's something I consistently run into. I'm just direct, and it's not that I'm being mean. I'm just direct.
Yeah.
And some people just like deteriorate if you're direct with them. I have there's the guy who owns the shops that we're collaborating to get them on base. He's a Marine vet. And we were talking about this yesterday. Just like some employees, you say something like, hey, you're doing this wrong. And they're like, man, like I feel attacked. And it's like, whoa, I'm just giving you feedback, Yeah. Constructive criticism is something that one of the biggest strengths, learning to take constructive criticism and applying that and giving it, I think is super critical to being a successful business owner. And I don't think that that skill is widely taught outside of the military.
Yeah, a lot of people just take offense to everything, especially in the environment we're in now, which is huge when you can actually take, constructive criticism and apply it in your business. So that's awesome. We get this question a lot. So if you're just graduating the academy, what are some things you think you can be doing now that will put you ahead in life?
So when you get married, house hacking may not be on the table anymore.
That's a fact.
Just
That's when I stopped house hacking.
Yeah.
My wife was like, no.
Yeah, and when you're starting a family, that makes sense, right? Like you don't want to share rooms and walls and kitchens with a bunch of strangers. So like if you're single, especially if you're not married and you have your own spot, 100% house hack.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you get into that serious relationship or you get married or you're in the same geographical location, you can more than likely kiss it goodbye. So that one's huge. Yeah, that one's huge. And then I would say this is probably an interesting comment. I would not take any financial advice from the advisors on base. I wouldn't go to first command. I wouldn't do any of the financial. It's just that they miss a lot. There's a lot of things that they're not. If you're trying to make it be an entrepreneur, live off of the income you make passively, stuff like that. That's not what they're teaching. Mm-hmm. So I think educating yourself with different resources, whether it's people in this network or there's a variety of other groups. There's 10X Vets, right? There's a variety of military active duty veteran groups, associating with those groups and actually getting some real world experience lessons from these individuals instead of the guy that it's a salary 9-to-5 job. And if they were doing that great, they probably wouldn't have that as their day job on base. Then, that's probably a little direct, but that's a piece of advice I'd have.
Okay. Solid. What about books and podcasts? If you were, just getting started out or anything like that, what would you recommend?
Well, there's always like the Robert Kiyosaki is always a great, Rich Dad Poor Dad. That's pivotal. And a lot of people will give you 1,000 books and you'll be like, let me read this book, this book, this book. I actually think it's extremely important to go back and read those core books at every different stage, because you're going to miss tidbits that you didn't have the perspective to catch.
That's true.
So when I read Robert Kiyosaki's book at the Naval Academy, most of it went over my head.
Yeah.
And then, as soon as I got into reading it last time I read it, which probably was 2 years ago now, completely different perspective that I took away from it. And I'm sure if I read it today, I would have a variety of other takeaways.
Yeah.
So all these books, because I know that you guys ask that question usually, all these books, I would say just like maybe plan to read it every time you feel you've closed or started a new chapter in your professional career, because I think you'll have different insights and you'll just learn that content so much better. Yeah,
that's the God's honest truth. What about podcasts? What podcast do you recommend?
I mean, this is a good podcast. Miltivet has one. Miltivet, I just met Yogi. He's the host for Miltivet. And they work with helping now veterans, so recently leaving active duty vets, find positions and jobs. So I think that's a cool one. We're going to be working with him soon. He's doing a Latino military one as well that we're planning on doing. That could be interesting. Nice. Scott Mackey's has one. So Scott Mackey's has the Academy Fund. He does the Sabum podcast. That's another one. And these are those groups that I mentioned, like join these groups, talk to these people, surround yourself with their real world experience insights instead of spending your time on that with that advisor on base.
Yeah. How do you recommend people reach out to other people? I know it's like an awkward question, but I feel like people are just scared? What do you have to say to the person that is literally like scared to reach out to somebody?
I think it's really important to be yourself because people are going to pick up on you being weird. I mean, if you're weird, that's okay. Be yourself. If you try to not be weird, it's going to be weirder than just being yourself. Don't try too hard. I think a lot of people, just being direct. If you're trying too hard, when you call me and I'm just meeting you, it's going to probably turn me off. I'm going to be like, that's strange. Like, just be real. Also, not like reaching out to somebody and being 100% business immediately.
Yeah.
That's super hard to do, right? Because if you're thinking of somebody and you want to work with them, you're probably excited about that.
Yeah.
The guy that I was talking about for getting the cigars on base, we went golfing. We didn't talk about business the entire time we were out there. We were bullshitting, right? We were building rapport. We were getting to know one another because it's important to also know that that person's somebody that you want to spend time with and you're comfortable around.
Absolutely.
And then when we finished golfing, he was like, hey, let's go to the bar. Let's grab a drink. And now we'll talk business because that was kind of the purpose of this meeting. But I'm glad that we got to know each other better, you know? And I think doing that, actually getting to know people and giving them your time is very vital to building a longer lasting relationship with somebody you want to work with.
How do you structure your schedule, Gabby? Because when you're building a business, it's really tempting to just take every meeting because you're like, oh, I need to tell as many people as possible. But there's an opportunity cost in that. So like, how do you figure out how to do all that?
Yeah, I'm still figuring that out, but I will say that's something I recently applied. When I told you guys I was working 18-hour days right after, or while still in the Marine Corps, because I was doing this real estate on the side, that was burnout 1,000, right? This past weekend, I had a few people that I wanted to talk to in terms of antipoliticas, and they were like, hey, can we talk tomorrow? This was Friday night. Like, can we make a meeting on Saturday? And I told both of them no. Like, mainly because I had homework I needed to do for my master's. So I was like, no, I'm like cutting this time out and I'm not going to be disrupted during this time. Focus time is super critical. I'm starting to put on my calendar focus time blocks. So I need to do emails. I need to talk to these investors. I need to talk to these business owners. I put a block of like 3 hours and I'm not looking at my phone during that time. It could ring. I'm not going to pick it up. Like It's on silent. It's away because there is a cost to switching your focus to so many different things in one period. If you are constantly shifting your focus, you're going to lose more time in the overall picture than if you just carved out those times and you dedicated them to whatever you want to dedicate them to.
And how do you make time for family and spouse in there? Because building a business is like one of the most needy and jealous mistresses there is. And you pretty much like can always pay attention to the business. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, for y'all that have kids, I don't know how you do it because
we don't.
Exactly.
One of the balls is getting dropped.
Yeah, because we've been trying, and I think we're gonna pick that try to have kids up again. But I'm nervous. I am personally so nervous because there aren't enough hours in the day. So I'd love to hear from you guys sometime. Like, how do you guys balance that with kids? With the spouse, it's super important to make date nights. So I lately have been looking for local events. So Mike's Farm is here, and they, during the holiday season, from 5 to 8 p.m., they'll have live music. They have a store with a variety of things. They have a coffee shop, a bakery, and it's a farm, and you can eat dinner there. So I was just like, hey, they have this event. So I try to make it meaningful events, right? I'm trying to find more robust events to block that time out for us. Same thing as the focus time. Like, I'm focused, I'm here, I'm present. Because I think that goes a lot. If you're trying to do all these things, it's going to be impossible to give continuous attention to your family and your spouse. But if you give them focus time, I actually think they're going to appreciate that more than if you're trying to fit them in between everything else and you're not fully present.
Yeah,
that's a really it's a good way of saying it. And sorry if there's feedback in the back, the cleaners are here, but I forget who told us this one time, but it was like, if you have two kids crying, focus on the older one because the chances of the younger one not remembering is higher. And we've always like implemented that rule. It's like the daughter's crying and our son is crying. We focus on the older one because the chances of our daughter remembering is less. Huh. And it's actually kind of nice because it's like triaging. So with business, it's the same thing though. The business is essentially always crying. Like I think even Mark Zuckerberg would say that. It's always crying. But there might be some things in the business that's like, well, that's an older part of the business crying. I need to focus on that. The younger part of the business can cry. I'll focus on it later. But it'd be the same thing with your kids.
Yeah. I think it comes down to putting, constraints. Constraints is the biggest thing, right? The business is always going to be there. So if you can't, do your work in the time allotted, then you're either going to have to, hire leverage or, look into AI to make your time more, proficient and yourself more proficient at the end of the day. And then, when you have kids, it's even more so on top of that. So that's pretty interesting.
Can I say $20 a month for ChatGPT is one of the best investments you can make as an entrepreneur? If you're doing 8,000 things, just to get a baseline and focus your mind on whatever you're trying to do, instead of having to take that, there's always ramp up time that our brains have when you're engaging in something. If you can throw in like, hey, this is what I need to do, and it gives you a template to start, super helpful. Also helpful with school. Can you imagine?
That's an interesting. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Say, no, I cannot imagine having ChatGPT while I was still at Navy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I would have gotten straight B's. It would have been great.
Yeah, it is crazy to see what AI is capable of. If you haven't looked into AI yet, that's the next point of advice. Look into just ChatGPT. Easy. Go to ChatGPT. If you have an email even and it's like asking you for all these things, just plug in the email and see what it spits out. It'll really help. I'm not saying copy paste, but it'll help you guide your effort.
I do need to do that. I feel like I know I interact with AI.
We need to have an episode on AI. I feel like, who's the AI goat out there? We need to find them. I know someone's an AI goat.
Definitely not me. I mean, like if there's a
definitely not me either.
Opposite, it's not me. It's not me and Geoffrey.
I did AI because I worked for Scale when I left the Marine Corps slightly. But I would say the other side of the coin is you do have to be careful. When I say don't just copy paste, I'm being serious. Like, because AI is prone, whatever the inputs are, the outputs are going to reflect that, right? So when you're using ChatGPT and it's just searching the web, so I'll give you an example. I tell it, hey, I need you to answer this question and give me references. It'll answer the question, and half the time those references, no joke, I just did this, one of them was 1975. So that'll just show you it's not perfect, right? So then the next response I told it was, use only 2024 references. Completely different output, but you have to guide it. So caution to the wind that AI can wreck you if you're not looking at what it's doing and you're not inputting the right content. Actually, the biggest AI tip is when you ask the question, include the resources that you would be going to yourself. It'll give you a better starting point with that. I don't know how we got onto this, but here we are.
No, that's me. I tend to do that with Geoffrey. I'll just bring up random stuff. Gaby, if you could, sort of like the parting thing, if you could give 3 pieces of advice to like a midshipman watching as we wind it down, what would they be?
Don't rent. Don't rent unless it's less than 3 months because you have like MOS school or something silly, right? Like, then you might consider renting unless you're with a GOAT realtor and JD's helping you with a loan and you can actually see the numbers and they make sense, but don't rent. That's silly. Make sure you're working. I think the property network, if I had that when I left the Marine Corps, like my first realtor sucked. So yeah,
it's crazy. It's like we all had that story. It's just like
take advantage of the GOAT network that you have at your disposal now to help you make a smart decision. And then I would say this is a personal thing, but like I spent so much time when I was in the Marine Corps getting home tired and just drinking beers endlessly when I got home and doing nothing productive.
Yeah,
that's a fact.
Second that.
I feel like I lost so much time to that. And it's so easy to fall into because, being in the military is stressful. If you can find something better to do at that time, even if it's like enrolling in a master's program and taking advantage of your TA or joining one of these groups, doing one of these accelerators so that you actually have something that's more valuable at the end of the day. I'm not saying don't unwind, don't burn yourself out, but take advantage of how much freedom you have with the military where you have a guaranteed paycheck as long as you don't mess up royally. And most of the time you have 9 to 5 or less, right? So like take advantage of that and the structure. You don't work weekends. You have so much time off, dude. It's crazy. Looking back on it, I'm like, dang, I had so much leave.
I don't know about that, Gabby. Being a swole. Shout out to all my swoles out there.
Yes, swoles have a different experience than Gabby and I in the Marines. It's like
okay, Marine Corps ground. I'll just say, right? Like take advantage of that time. But like seriously, I think I wish I would have spent more of that time. Because there's some goats out there that do it, right? Like now in our accelerators, we see them and they're like, yeah, I'm a 2024 grad. And I'm like, holy cow. And you're already talking here. Like, be that guy or gal. Don't be the one that drank 5 beers and watched TV because I was so stressed out at work.
It's great advice.
That is really good advice too. Yeah. Because I feel like a lot of us do that. Like when I, first got to Norfolk, it was like, drink pretty much Wednesday to Sunday, and then really
Monday to Tuesday also.
The habitual, I think our rule of thumb actually is like if you're drinking for stress, it's not the right choice. That's why we're all about celebrating with this company and not habit making. But it's like legitimately. So if you're using one of the vices, because we all have them, and they're not going to be what kill us. Do it to celebrate. Don't do it because you're stressed, because that is the easiest track to doing it habitually and actually doing it to where it's affecting your health.
Well said. I think that's a good place to end because a lot of people need to hear that. Me included. I think that's such good advice.
I'm trying to apply it. Trying to apply it.
Same. Trying to apply it is like half a life. Like just trying. Well, thank you so much, Gabby. Your class act. I can't wait to finish the checkout process. Kudos to you. Kudos to Lauren, because starting a business and having a founder as a spouse is not that much fun, honestly.
She's my number one employee. She wanted me to share that.
Gabby, where can the goats find you at?
Yeah, so antipoliticas.shop is our website. We have, if you look up Antipoliticas, which is literally anti-politic and then AS at the end. And that's exactly what it means, just anti-political. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Happy to connect with anybody on LinkedIn. And then my phone number, you can Google me and find my cell because I'm a realtor. So feel free to shoot a text. It is very easy to find my contact information. Happy to connect with anybody on cigars, women's sports, real estate, life in the pursuit of happiness. Hit me up.
Awesome. Gabby, you're a rock star. This is Geoffrey Whiteside and JD Kameen signing out.